Welcome to Sports and Courts. Today I'm here with Schuyler Corbin, who is a recent graduate at Tulane Law and is an incoming labor/employment litigation and sports associate at Munck Wilson Mandala. Congrats, and how do you feel?
Thank you very much. And thank you for having me. And I feel great. Honestly, the experience at law school was definitely long and arduous. But being able to come out with a job and one that's in sports especially is just a blessing. So I feel good getting ready to get started soon.
Yes. So first question is, were you always interested in sports, or were you always interested in being a lawyer? Like, what was your story and how did you get here?
Yeah, so I guess for context, I went to undergrad at the University of Southern California. I knew that I wanted to be involved in sports business from the time I was in high school. So while I was there, I did a lot of work with athletics. I worked at the athletic department. I was a equipment manager for the football team. I did an internship at an agency. So I was really just, trying to get my feet wet and really understand what the sports business landscape looked like while I was still in college. Now I ended up graduating college and taking a job that had nothing to do with sports. And I did it for about, I want to say 2 years exactly. And it just wasn't for me. I knew that my passions were better served doing something related to sports. And what I had originally wanted to do was be more on like the advocacy side for athletes in particular. So I guess the traditional route would be being a sports agent. And as you know, lots of sports agents have law degrees. So I decided to start looking into law programs again. And I came across Tulane with the sports law program and sat down with Professor Gabe Feldman at an admitted students weekend. And I was just sold on the experience and the connections that I knew I could make at Tulane. So yeah, I knew before heading to law school that I wanted to be in sports, but I didn't really understand the full spectrum of sports law opportunities until I got to law school.
Right. It's amazing. So moving on from that, you also externed at with the sports team, New Orleans Saints, which is extraordinary. I feel like every law student who's interested in sports would love to work with the sports team. So what was your experience like doing that? And was it during the semester? Were you carrying class load while being an extern? What was that like?
Yeah, I can tell you a lot about that experience because it was my third year of law school, which was the one that just passed. I obviously recently graduated, but that was an externship that took place during the school year. And just for, I guess, clarity, the externship with the Saints and Pelicans in-house counsel is one that's actually exclusively through Tulane Law School. So shout out to Tulane for hooking it up. It was also more legally based. A lot of people think when you're working with the team, you get to be involved on the sports side, but this was a lot of like the corporate work with the team. So did a lot of like sweepstakes rules, looked at some licensing agreements for music, looked at a little bit of workers' comp and things of that nature that, you might normally outsource to a regular lawyer, but they have people on the inside doing this. It was during the semester, like I said earlier, and that was a cumbersome process only because of, how I ended up arranging my schedule. I wouldn't recommend anybody do what I did that semester, but it ended up still being really rewarding. I don't regret doing it one bit. It was actually one of the best parts of law school, getting to work directly with that team and making that connection, which I think is the most valuable part of any internship or externship. So yeah, it was really rewarding and I'm glad I got to do it.
Yeah, amazing. And so you were in law school, you had the classes. This last year, you had the externship. You were also in different societies, extracurriculars, activities. What would you say was your best one, or like the one that has impacted your legal career thus far and has helped you in the practical world?
Yeah, it's hard to pinpoint just one. I could probably give you a combination of
Hey,
two.
let's do a combo then.
Sure. But I'd say it was one, obviously the Sports Law Society at Tulane. I got involved with that from the moment I got to campus. I was running for 1L rep in that society, ended up getting it. And then the next year as a 2L, I was the speaker chair in charge of getting guest speakers for the society. And then my third year, ultimately getting to lead it as the president. So I'd say that was the very first one. It was a really good experience in terms of just getting to network. Obviously, that's the most important part of not just sports and sports law, but law in general, in my opinion. I think being able to build connections is really what's going to take you to the next level. And then the second society that I think really helped was being a part of the Tulane professional football negotiation competition. So for people who aren't familiar, Tulane has three, well, now we have four. We introduced the fourth competition this past year for sports negotiations. So we have football, basketball, we have a baseball arbitration competition, and now we have an international soccer negotiation competition. So it's been kind of like a hot spot for those competitions. I see a few more popping up across the country. Perhaps your school has even competed in some of it. But yeah, that was probably another really good experience that I got to have while I was at Tulane. Being a part of the board for that competition for 2 years gave me the opportunity to network directly with front office executives in the NFL. It really blew my mind when I first got to Tulane. I was like, wow, like that person's negotiating so-and-so's contract on this team, and you hear about it, you see it on ESPN scrolling across on the ticker, and you're like, wow, that was the person who's responsible for it. And, just being met with the respect from those high level executives that you're in a program that's going to push you forward and they're teaching you the right things was really just like a humbling experience. And I really, really got a lot out of that. So I'd say Sports Law Society for sure, and then the negotiation competition for football.
Okay, great. Yeah, I heard Tulane is killing it with the sports competition, so good for y'all. We all love it. And then going off of that, you were also awarded third place in the Sports Lawyers Association Law Student Writing Competition. Again, congrats. What was that process like? Can any law student do that? Would you recommend law students to write on these competitions? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I'm glad you asked, because this is actually, there's a story behind this. I noticed that from the very first day. Again, like I was just one of those overly eager people to start law school, but if you're not, don't worry about it. I think everybody kind of finds their groove after a certain amount of time. But I got to Tulane and I was already looking at the Sports Lawyers Association as an organization I'd like to get involved in as a law student, and then eventually as a practicing attorney. But I noticed that they had a writing competition that not only awarded money for, placing in the competition, so you get scholarship money if you win, but they also published the first place essay in the Sports Lawyers Journal, which is obviously a really respected journal in terms of like legal analysis and case studies for legal issues in sports law. So I knew I wanted to do that as a 1L. I tried every single year, right? So it wasn't like I just did it once and, hit on the first try. Didn't place for the first 2 years, but finally as a 3L, I think with the combination of the topic and just, the experience I had from not really getting through the first couple of times, I finally was able to place third in that competition. And it was a really, really awesome experience because we went to the Sports Lawyers Association conference in Atlanta, and we actually got to, get recognized in front of many practicing attorneys, and people were coming up to me, congratulating me. And it just served as another opportunity to kind of not only showcase my knowledge and my ability to analyze legal issues in sports, but also just to, network and talk to people that I'll maybe one day be working with,
Right.
So I would highly recommend anybody who's interested in sports law to compete. It's not very challenging. The rules are on the Sports Lawyers Association website. And it'll just give you a good opportunity to market yourself, because even if you don't compete in this competition, I think getting your work product and your writing out there and just showcasing your knowledge and abilities is very important in sports law.
Right. I think another important thing is persistency. Clearly you were persistent, and by the third year, you definitely got on. And so amazing. Yeah, great opportunity. Okay. So now post grad, you took the bar exam. God bless. It's over, it's done with. whatever. And you're now an incoming associate, specifically labor and employment litigation and sports associate, which is a mouthful, at Munck Wilson and Mandala. So obviously you were a summer associate here, right? And now you're an incoming. So what was the work that you did as a summer associate? And I don't know if you know what work you will be doing as an incoming associate, but what does the day-to-day look like as a litigation and sports associate for labor and employment?
Sure. So I can give you some good context as to what it looked like as a summer associate first. And that was, I was basically working full-time hours. Obviously, you know, in law, there's no shortage of hours being worked. So it was definitely busy. I was mainly doing a lot of legal research, writing memos. I even got a chance to take a stab at writing a motion once.
Oh, wow.
Because it was a 6-week clerkship. So I didn't have like too much time to get a lot accomplished, because, you know, when you're coming in as a summer associate, the idea is that you want to like pump out a lot of work, but in reality, like, you're still learning and they expect you to be learning, or at least they were at my law firm. Maybe I was fortunate. And I did a lot of that. And then on the sports side, I did actually get a chance to do a lot of like research and compiling like all the different states' NIL laws. So just for context, at the law firm that I'm working at, the sports and the litigation sides are a little bit separate. We haven't gotten involved in like too many sports related lawsuits, but we do corporate work for sports related clients. So that is mainly what I'll probably be doing once I start in a few weeks, actually. And I think the most important thing to keep in mind is that, you know, when you're entering these spaces, just like try to absorb as much as possible. You're not going to, you know a whole bunch, and that's to be expected. You know, I think people think, oh, if you're getting good grades and you go into the interview, like they want to know that you are like super knowledgeable and that you know a whole bunch about this topic. And really, you just need to have kind of like a hunger for it, and you need to, you know, demonstrate that you can learn and learn quickly. So I think that'd be my main advice. And yeah, no, I'm excited to get started. I'd be happy to join you again once I start working and tell you a little bit more about the exciting stuff we have going on. But yeah, mainly labor and employment litigation is dealing with the lawsuits. And then the sports side, for now, we're dealing a lot with the corporate work and contracts related to NIL.
Right. And I'll be sure to check in, don't worry. But so you work in the labor and employment sector practice area. Was there some sort of rotational program at your firm? Like, how did you know you wanted to do that area? Were you just placed in it? Did you have an interest in it?
That's a great question. So I did actually know labor and employment was my primary area of interest, because when I was, like I said, when I got to law school, I didn't really understand the full spectrum of sports law, but you started to see, or as the years progressed, like I started to see kind of all the different opportunities. And I ended up looking at the players associations, and before law school, believe it or not, it didn't even register in my head that they were labor unions, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, so I started looking at that, and the players associations were organizations that I could picture myself with, either in the short term or the long term. And I was like, well, I figure if I'm working at a labor union, I should probably know labor law, right? And when I saw this opportunity pop up at Munck Wilson Mandala, it was a no-brainer for me. I was like, well, if I get experience in labor and employment, who knows what the next step could be. And that actually speaks to another opportunity that I had clerking at Major League Baseball Players Association, and getting to see how the labor law kind of like unfolds in real time. So I knew that I wanted to get involved in that, and it was fine with me getting to only do that and focus on it, because I feel like getting to specialize early on was exactly what I was looking for.
Right. And I'm glad you mentioned the MLB. So you got that through the Peggy Browning Fellowship. So what was that process like? How did you get placed with the MLB? I feel like Boston's, I didn't even know about it prior to looking at your LinkedIn page. And I was like, what the heck is this? So let's talk about that.
Yeah, and you know, I have a bit of a unique story when it comes to securing the internship. So it was through Peggy Browning. I was involved in the mentorship program here at Tulane for the Sports Law Society. So through our Sports Law Society, we have a whole network of practicing attorneys or people involved in sports law who have agreed to dedicate time to at least, guiding some of the students. They might not always, help you secure something like with them, but that shouldn't be the goal of a mentorship, in my opinion, anyway. But I was fortunate enough to be paired with a gentleman named Casey Schwab, who's involved with Altius Sports Partners now. They do a lot of name, image, and likeness consulting for colleges. And he was a former vice president of business and legal affairs at the NFL Players Association. So all those labor unions in sports are kind of in the same circle. They're, communicating best practices, because at the end of the day, the goal is protecting athletes and, doing the best that you can for them. So when I communicated my goals to him and told him what I was interested in, he encouraged me. He said, don't count out baseball, because at the time my favorite sport and favorite area to get into was football, right? I was on the football negotiation board, but he's like, don't count out things like baseball or like the other sports that you might not look at too much, like soccer or even, women's sports too. And I took that to heart. I started applying to all those things. And the Peggy Browning fellowship was something that just got presented to me. And when I did it, I had to do, I want to say it was 2 essays. You had to, fill out a long application, kind of like describing your qualifications and whatnot. But for anybody who's interested in applying, I'm not sure if the prompt changed, but the prompt was really just trying to gauge why you were interested in labor law, and like, in particular, like union side labor law. So protecting the the employees, and in this context, the athletes. So what I had written about was my experience as a student manager at USC, and just kind of seeing like, what the grind felt like, and what being kind of like at the bottom of the barrel, kind of felt like, because it was hard work and it was unpaid work. But I wrote it just to kind of say that I understand this is a reality for people. And then, that there's a fight to be had on behalf of people like that. So if you're interested in doing stuff for union side labor, and then doing stuff for athletes, I think you should really kind of like have a conversation with yourself and kind of channel that inner advocate and see, what is it? What problems are they having that I just have a passion for solving? And for me, when it comes to athletes, it's really just about protecting their long-term wealth, because at the end of the day, there's a lot of athletes making millions and millions of dollars that don't last them their entire lives, and bankruptcy is really a big issue, particularly in basketball and football. So that was what clicked with me. And that's ultimately what I think, stood out on my application.
Right, amazing. I mean, you got it, so it must have been
Yeah.
great. So you specifically knew your area, right? And I feel like typically with sports, like you said, we come in and we're like, I want to do sports law, and you don't really understand it's doing law, regular law within the field of sports. So would you recommend law students to kind of know their area, know their niche, or is it okay to kind of explore and find out as you go? What would you recommend?
My recommendation is absolutely to explore, because at the end of the day, if you haven't, I only knew that I wanted to do labor and employment and then do something in sports, particularly because I was doing the exploring back in college, right? But that's not the reality for everyone. Sometimes it takes like one experience that you have post college to be like, wow, this is something that's like super interesting.
Right.
So definitely explore. If you don't know what you're trying to get involved with, my recommendation for sports law is to at least have a general understanding of the landscape in sports law. So when I say that, I mean like what areas of law are most like salient in law, in sports law. So thinking about, I'll say it again, labor and employment, thinking about contracts, thinking about antitrust is a big area, thinking about intellectual property and NIL, at least kind of like research the landscape so that you can say, okay, which one of these is at least appealing to me on the surface, then pursue opportunities that are pertaining to that. Even if it's not necessarily a sports related role, you can always kind of like draw the parallels, right? You'll be able to say, okay, I did like a trademark application at this last firm, or like I walked through it with a associate who's above me or a partner who's above me. And even though it wasn't pertaining to a sports trademark, you know that the process applies to the same sports law realm. So I would say explore as much as possible and just, use those experiences to have the transferable skills when it comes to finally find that role in sports.
Right. Okay. And I always do an insight question with my interviewers, but if you didn't go to law school, what would you be doing right now? Like, what is the alternative for Schuyler?
So I had an undergraduate business degree. I worked in tech at IBM doing product management for 2 years. Like I said at the beginning, it wasn't for me, but I feel like if I didn't go to law school, I probably would have pursued an MBA or something. Because at the time, remember I was saying I was interested in being an agent.
Right.
Each individual players association has different requirements to get certification to be an agent and represent players. And being interested in football, the NFLPA requires that you have a postgraduate degree. So I probably still would have pursued some postgraduate education. But if it wasn't a law degree, I'd probably say like master's of business. Now, if I didn't do the agency route, if I just completely tried to flip it on its head, I'd probably say I would have gotten involved in like some kind of salary cap financial analysis, and tried to go the team route right out of college. But yeah, no, I'm thankful that I'm here with the law degree.
Right. JD.
Yeah, fingers crossed for the bar results in a few months. And yeah, no, law has been a really rewarding education. And I'm excited to see kind of like what doors it unlocks in the future as well.
Right. And then I guess my last question is, do you have like a dream goal in sports, like a specific area or place or position you want to work at in sports? Like this is the end for you.
It's interesting because I always think about it and it's like, I almost feel like I have like 4 or 5 dreams.
Which is fine.
Right, because it's like such an exciting space and there's so many different opportunities that are interesting to me. But if I had to say one that was my favorite and that I could like genuinely picture myself doing and like doing really well, I'd probably say being one of the Players Association's like executive directors. So something like the Morris Smith or like a Tamika Tremalio at the NBPA. And now we have Tony Clark at the MLBPA. So, one of those players associations, even if it's in soccer, like I'm starting to learn a little bit more about the MLS and their labor issues. I could see myself doing that because it's like the ultimate advocate role, right, in sports. Right. So, that would probably be it. Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you so much for joining me today. It was a pleasure having you. Sports and Courts loves bringing new members in, so you're in. But yeah, I'll definitely keep my tabs on you. Hopefully we'll reach in again, but yeah, thank you so much.
Absolutely. No, it was a pleasure being here and good luck.